But a higher alert remains for northern regions like Hokkaido and Tomioka. Officials say tsunami waves were still being observed and the threat of damage remains. People in coastal areas are advised to stay on high ground or in evacuation shelters. Authorities warn that dangerous conditions could continue for another day. Meanwhile, the Philippines has lifted all tsunami advisories after reporting no significant sea level disturbances. On the U.S. West Coast, waves over a meter high have hit Northern California. In Crescent City, waves reached 3.6 feet. Further south in Arena Cove, heights have doubled to 3 feet. A warning remains in place for areas up to the Oregon border. We're now joined by our guest this hour, Christina Malyk, who's a Sputnik special correspondent. She joins us live from Moscow. Christina, thank you very much for joining us. Obviously, you are joining us from the Russian capital. However, news of this earthquake must have brought alarm. Something that was expected to be a disaster so far hasn't been as serious as expected. However, could you take us through the day in the information that you have heard and the feeling in the Russian capital and of the Russian people that this huge 8.8 magnitude earthquake that happened on Russian land? Can you hear me? Hi, Christina, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering if did you hear my question?
No, unfortunately, I didn't hear.
Apologies, Christina. So essentially, my thoughts have just been throughout this day, and obviously that this 8.8 magnitude earthquake occurred in Russia, that region of the east. Obviously, you are in Moscow now. Just wondering if you could take me through the day, the feelings in Russia regarding this disaster. Obviously, we thought something worse was coming. It so far hasn't. Can you take us through the feelings of the Russian capital?
Feelings are really good because we see that our infrastructure, Russian emergency services and all the infrastructure that was built in Russian Far East to prevent any damages from such an earthquakes are working really good. There is no panic, so people are reacting normally according to all the emergency instructions that were done earlier. So the feeling is really good. We are feeling, I think we are feeling just like successful ones because it's the strongest earthquake since 1952, and there is no damage, there is no casualties, and I think it's a big success.
Yes. Should people still be worried? Are people still worried in Russia? Obviously, the alert has now been downgraded. However, some of the surrounding areas, the alert levels still remain very high. What's the feeling in regards to the wider the region here?
There is no worries. No one is in panic. Everything is working, so there is no electricity or internet shortage. So everything is working well. Everything is under control, so no one is panicking, no one is worrying. If someone thinks that his staying is a place which is not really safe, he can just stay to the government and to move in another part of the region, so the government will help and provide with all they need. So there is no problem, really.
How about how it's going to affect the wider region? We've heard of some small infrastructure damage. Do you think that the Russian infrastructure was prepared for something like this to happen? And how frequent of an occurrence is this in Russian territory?
Well, as I've already said, the Far East Russian territory, which is usually used to get some earthquakes with different strength, was well prepared. As our Earth Physics Academy have said, Russia was preparing for such a strong earthquake for 30 years. So everything was prepared, people was prepared, the infrastructure was prepared, the buildings was built in order to resist such disasters. So everyone is knowing that there will be some aftershocks, and no one is in panic. So we are ready. So nothing bad will be after it.
Christina, in light of the tsunami's impact on the Kuril Islands, how might this influence Russia's territorial claims and relations with neighbouring countries, especially Japan?
I don't think that such a natural disaster that was in the Kuril Islands may impact on this issue, just because, on the Kuril Islands was a fishing factory that was a bit damaged and a bit flooded. So there is no casualties and no damages as well. So I don't see there any problem for Russian independence and on the Kuril Islands.
Yes, and Christina, the earthquake's epicenter was obviously near the so-called Pacific Ring of Fire. How does this event compare to other seismic activities in the region, and what does it indicate about the frequency of tectonic plate movements in the region?
I am not a scientist, and I cannot just think about the perspectives of tectonic actions in the region, of course, but what I see that Russia is coping with this and coping really successfully. As far as I can see, maybe Russia's Far East is coping the disaster the most successful on the Asia-Pacific region now. That's all that I can say.
Yes, and obviously the earthquake prompted the tsunami warnings across the Pacific, affecting countries like Japan, the Philippines, and the US West Coast as well. What does this indicate about the interconnectedness of these disaster risks in the Pacific region?
I think that's the question for some earth physics, not for me as a journalist, yes. Because I just don't know how can this even impact on the Asia-Pacific region, just in the scale of physics or geography.
Yes, of course. Christina, thank you very much for joining us on the program. We will bring you all the updates when it comes to this, in regards to this earthquake that has occurred, as we get them. I want to give you a quick overview of the events that have transpired today. The first waves, triggered by a massive 8.8 earthquake off Russia's coast, have reached the shores of the US states Hawaii and California. This is what we know so far about this. This initially, as we've said, it hit eastern Russia, about 78 miles away from the Petropavlovsk-Kamchatka region. The tremor had a depth of around 18 kilometers, according to the US Geological Survey, and it's one of the strongest earthquakes ever on record. There are no reports of any injuries or fatalities, but photos from towns and areas around the far eastern coast of Russia show buildings destroyed, ports submerged, and people being evacuated by officials. Waves generated by the tsunami have started to hit American shores as well, along Hawaii's coasts and along the west coast beach of California. Hawaiian officials have now said that they have downgraded the tsunami alerts to an advisory level, down from a high alert level, and told residents that they can indeed return home with caution. Western US states have also triggered alarm bells as well. We're now joined by Dr. Sanjay Kumar. He's a journalist from the Korea Herald, located in Seoul, South Korea. Dr. Kumar, thank you very much for joining us. This earthquake has been unprecedented today. Obviously, we've seen certain governments pull their alerts back a bit further, saying yes, it is a bit safer to come out. But what have you heard about how this tsunami has affected the people and the livelihoods on Korea's coast?
It is better be safe than late. This is the mood here of the people in Korea and Japan. And as you know, this earthquakes, it affects the underground sea level as well. So this has to be seen with a very cautious approach, because we should not forget in 2011, there had been this huge disasters caused by tsunami, and many people lost lives, and it included also the nuclear reactor. So such kind of repetition must not happen, and because of that, Korea is also very closely watching, and Japan remains on high alert. But from the people's perspective, we have to get updates. We have to get the latest news through apps. You know, it is a digital world, so we have to be digitally very connected, and people also have to be very alarmed, because the government only cannot make all the decisions on a very emergency level. So that's why it is better to be safe than late. This is my message.
What's been the feeling throughout the day, Dr. Kumar? There was obviously a cautiousness and many, in many circumstances, worry that there would have been a huge disaster, that waves would be increasing throughout the day. However, we have seen now a decrease in main regions, with significant regions pulling back their warnings. However, what has been the thoughts throughout the day in regards to the fact that this some sort of calamitous event could happen?
It should be seen as a natural disaster, and of course, the everyday life here in Korea and even most of the parts of Japan, and even including Russia, if we accept the Far East region, everyday life has not been affected, except in some parts of US too, like as the former and the ex-panelist was referring to. Some places had been affected, but the only good thing here is right now is that not a single person have lost life. So this should not happen. This must not happen. And a cautious approach is needed. If you ask Korean perspective, then historically and geographically, Korea had been fortunate enough not to have a large-scale tsunami. But, this is a natural disaster, so it must not be seen in a relaxed manner. And that is why there is a high alert through updates, through message, emergency alerts, and people have to be very cautious, as well as the authorities. So this is my reiteration again.
Yes, and how would you assess the government's messaging during this time, the time of a possible severe climate event? Has there been clear communication through the Korean government?
Korean government is closely watching the situation, and if there are urgent need for alerts, definitely we are going to receive that. Korean government has been doing it since couple of years, especially from the COVID-19, very frequently, and there were actually concerns also from the civilian groups that why these emergency alerts are frequently being sent to entire population. So that's why, unless there is something very serious, I'm sure that the meteorological department is not going to just send the messages unless they get some kind of latest assessment. But if we see the Japan's perspective, then of course Japan has learned a lesson, and they are very detailed. I'm sure that the Japanese friends and the authorities there are going to make these things under control. And if there is a need of cooperation between Japanese and Korean authorities also, I think they are open to that. So collaboration, cooperation, and as well as regular updates through apps and digital transformation is the need right now, and everybody should use it.
Yes, exactly. That follows on from my next question. How can South Korea strengthen its social safety nets to better support communities in future disaster scenarios like this one?
Yes, of course.
Yes, Dr. Kumar, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear. Yeah, definitely, I agree with you. This has to be taken very seriously. Although right now, these things are very experimental, and uh, you have to get every assessment and updates. Recently, there had been rain disasters because of downpours and all. So Korean authorities are alert on this, and I'm sure they are going to cooperate with the Japan and the other international partners.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Sanjay Kumar, for joining us on the program. Pleasure having you. We are, as we say, covering this developing situation about the earthquake that started off in Russia and has hit vastly around the Pacific region. This, of course, started in Russia's eastern province, where the quake's epicenter hit at an 8.8 magnitude. And it occurred at an epicenter of around 78 miles from the Petropavlovsk-Kamchatka region. The tremor had an depth of 18 kilometers, which according to the US Geological Survey is one of the strongest earthquakes ever on record. However, given that, there's been no reports of any fatalities or injuries. But photos from towns and areas on the far eastern coast of Russia show buildings destroyed, ports submerged, and people being evacuated by officials. Waves have generated by the tsunami, and they've started to hit American shores along Hawaii's coast and some of the coast of California. Hawaiian officials have downgraded tsunami alerts to an advisory level, and they have told residents that they may return home with caution. Western states, including Washington, Western US states, including Washington, Oregon, and Alaska, as well as Canada's British Columbia, are expected to be hit with high waves, leading them to be on an alert. They're expected in the coming hours. Warnings of various levels have also been issued for Ecuador, Indonesia, Peru, and Japan. We're now joined by Tomohiko Taniguchi, who's a former advisor to late Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Thank you very much for joining us, Tomohiko. I first want you to ask, Japan is a country that has been plagued by earthquakes and tsunamis throughout its history. When this happened, there must have been an alarm in the country that something was coming. What has been the feeling in Japan throughout the past 14 hours since news of this earthquake came through?
The instant alarming system has been in place throughout the nation, regardless of the nationality, whether you're a Japanese or foreigner. Your smartphone rings all of a sudden with a very much alarming signal. And then you turn on your smartphone or TV set, computer, and then you see where the seismic action movement is occurring. This morning, the nation was stunned by the magnitude that they heard, magnitude 8.0 or even above from the Russian Far East. And so the tsunami alert the next moment was issued, and I think there's been a learning, there's been a precedent from which many learned a lesson or two. That is that when you hear that sort of alert, you must leave as far as possible from the seashore, and you must climb up to as high above as possible. Maybe hilltop, mountaintop, or 5th floor and the 6th floor. I think that's what has occurred, especially in places that face the seas. I am living in a remote place from the seashore, so I have had nothing. I have felt nothing, and 14 hours after that, it's turned out that very, very little damage has been caused throughout the nation.
Yes, well, very, very glad you're safe, Tomohiko. With the events obviously originating off the coast of Russia, how did Japan coordinate its response with neighboring countries to ensure timely warnings and evacuations?
I understand there is an ocean-wide sensor systems scattering around the Pacific Ocean. And those signals detect the alpha wave and beta wave that the seismic movement causes. And so whoever takes the first alpha signal, it's been customary for that signal to be shared instantaneously by all parties involved, regardless of the nations. So I'm not sure if Japan was the first that detected the alpha wave. Maybe it was Russia, but that signal, the next moment, was shared across the ocean region.
Tomohiko, most of these warnings and alerts have now been scaled down. However, for regions like Hokkaido and Tohoku, higher alerts remain in place. How do the Japanese authorities manage evacuation and public safety in these high-risk areas especially?
It was only 14 years ago, in 2011, March 11, the Japanese archipelago felt a tremendous tremor, as you know, followed by tsunami and nuclear meltdown. And that was such a calamity, and that was such a traumatic experience. I think the public have been very much prepared for these sort of things. And the authority is daily sending information so that fake news and false assertions might not be prevalent. So in times of crisis like this, what's important is to continue to show reliable information. And that reliable information comes from the authority and the legacy media, if you like, TV broadcasting networks and so on and so forth. So that's what has incentivized and propelled the people sharing the seashores in the northern part of Japan to get prepared. But the challenge, however, is that public transportation system is largely put into halt, and the people are feeling very much troubled because they cannot find an appropriate means to come back home at the moment. So at this hour, station by station, you see a huge queue of people waiting for taxis to come.
Oh yes, Tomohiko, thank you very much. Please stay with us. We have some breaking updates. The Kremlin has confirmed that no casualties were reported after a powerful 8.8 earthquake struck off Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula. Spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said the country's strong building construction and well-functioning alert systems helped prevent any loss of life. Authorities remain on high alert as aftershocks are possible. We're once again joined by Tomohiko Taniguchi. How do you what do you make of the fact that this is one of the highest recorded earthquakes in history, 8.8 magnitude, yet we are still hearing from that there has been no casualties? How this seems to be some sort of miraculous event where this huge event has happened. What are your thoughts, Tomohiko?
The major tremor changes from one to another. There is no common set pattern. And this one has been, in that sense, not the worst kind because of the epicenter, where the earthquake happened. And when it occurred, major urban areas were not nearby. if this has happened off Tokyo, it's beyond anyone's imagination. That could have been the worst kind of human tragedies ever recorded. But I wouldn't say luckily, but to be honest, the center of tremor was off the coast, and the nearby areas were not so much densely populated. I think that's been one positive factor you can find.
Yes, Tomohiko, thank you. Please also stay with us. The International Atomic Agency says initial reports show no safety impact on nuclear power plants along the Pacific coast after the massive earthquake in Russia's Far East. We're now once again joined by Tomohiko to discuss this final update. How important is that of an update? How big of a risk is there that these natural disasters do affect these dangerous plants, these dangerous nuclear plants? How lucky is it that none of these dangerous sites were affected by this huge natural disaster that we've had?
Originally, all nuclear power plants have been designed to withstand mega earthquakes. What did not exist for the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that went into meltdown was that they did not have emergency power source uphill. In retrospect, that was a cardinal error, that Fukushima Daiichi had its emergency power source very close to the seashore. And so it was not earthquake of such magnitude. It was the tsunami of 10 meters high that hit the power plant, caused the failure of the power supply, and that caused the chain reaction that culminated in the nuclear meltdown. So one important lesson is that you need to have emergency power source very much far from the seashore. And I think that's been one very much important lesson.
Tomohiko Taniguchi, thank you very much for your insight and joining us on the program. We do have some breaking news to finish off this hour. Japan's meteorological agency has said that Japan has lifted all tsunami warnings and has also downgraded it to tsunami advisory. Well, that is all we have time for with that news. We will continue to bring you more news updates on this ongoing situation and from